In this video, we're going to show you how to replace an exhaust manifold on your Hyundai Sonata. Let's get started. Remove the connectors for the O2 sensors. There's a push button on the side of this one. Push that. Push on the button on the side of the connector and remove it using a flat blade screwdriver. I'm going to pop out the connector right next to it. Push up from the bottom and pry it out of the bracket. Push on the side and remove the connector. Using a right angle pick, we're going to remove this connector off of the bracket. There's a hole on the left side. There should be a tab inside of here. You're going to push on that. Then we can pull this forward. Pull the connector off of the bracket. Using a pair of pliers, we're going to squeeze these plastic clips and remove them out of the bracket. We only need to remove this bottom plastic piece. You can leave this top one in. I had to remove the top one to be able to remove the lower one. Using a 22mm O2 socket, we're going to remove the O2 sensor. Remove the O2 sensor out of the bracket. Using a 22mm O2 sensor socket, we're going to remove the downstream O2 sensor. We are unable to remove our downstream O2 sensor, so once the manifold is out of the car, we'll remove this. Using a 17mm socket, remove the nut for the exhaust stud. Do the same thing on the other side. Using a 14mm socket, remove the bolt on the bottom of the catalytic converter. Using a 10mm socket, remove the bolt for the heat shield. Remove the bolt. There's one more bolt on the left side. Remove the bolt. On the top of the exhaust manifold, there will be two more 10mm bolts for the heat shield. Remove those. Remove the heat shield. Using a 14mm socket, go around and remove all of the nuts for the exhaust manifold. Get the top three loose, then move to the lowers. Remove the nuts for the manifold. reaching down behind the motor, pull the exhaust pipe off of the exhaust manifold, pull the exhaust manifold backwards, and then straight up and out. Remove the exhaust manifold. Remove the exhaust manifold gasket. Using a razor blade, a light abrasive, or a carbide scraper, go ahead and clean up the mating surface for the exhaust manifold. We don't want to take off any material, just any of the corrosion. When you're doing this, try to scrape away from the ports so you don't get anything inside of there. Go around and do this for the whole surface. Using a 12mm socket, we're going to remove the bolts for these heat shields. Remove the shields. Install the heat shields. We are unable to remove our O2 sensor from the old exhaust manifold, so we will be replacing it in the new one. Go around and get the bolts started. Go around and snug the bolts down. Install the O2 sensor. Torque the O2 sensor to 30 foot-pounds. Included in the manifold kit will be these studs. Go ahead and get them started by hand. And you could either use a double nut method where you screw 2 nuts onto the stud and then use the top one to snug it down, or use a stud installer / remover and install it. Get it nice and tight and do the same thing on the other one. Using a whizzer wheel, I'm going to go around and clean up the flange on our exhaust pipe. Using a clean rag and some parts cleaner, we're going to go through and clean the whole mating surface for our gasket. Install the exhaust gasket. This edge is going to go up top. Install it onto the studs. Using a clean rag and some parts cleaner, go ahead and wipe down the surface for the new exhaust manifold. Get any of the oil off. Install the exhaust manifold down into the vehicle. Install the exhaust manifold. Get the nuts started for the exhaust manifold. Using a 14mm socket, go around and snug down all of the nuts. Torque the manifold nuts to 52 foot-pounds. Install the heat shield. Make sure that the O2 sensor is running over the shield and not under. Install the bolts. Install the bolts. Go around and snug the bolts down. Install the upstream O2 sensor. Torque the O2 sensor to 40 foot-pounds. Pull the upstream O2 sensor connector over. Install the plastic stay into the bracket. And install the connector into the bracket. Push until you hear a click. Give it a pull, make sure it's locked on. Grab the downstream O2 sensor, pull it over, install it onto the bracket. Install the connector, push until you hear a click. If you don't hear a click, give it a pull, make sure it's locked on. Install the exhaust gasket. Install the exhaust pipe. Get the nuts started. Using a 17mm socket, snug the nut down. Make sure the nuts are nice and tight. Install the bottom bolt for the bracket. Get it started by hand. Snug it down. Torque the bottom bolt to 52 foot-pounds.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.